Oh, great one, divine one, all loving, all knowing, all in our presence. We thank you for the ancestors. We thank you for the trees. We thank you for the earth. We thank you for these bodies. We thank you for our spirits. We open up this space. We welcome all in this space. We create a circle of protection and love for this space. We ask that you, in all your loving glory, create a space for us to grow, to learn, to achieve, to heal. We ask that you guide today's presenters with the utmost truth, wisdom, and knowledge. And we ask participants and attendees have open hearts and open minds, and that they may receive any and every blessing that will come through today. Thank you for this work that you have called us to do, not just to hold space, but to welcome wholeness, healing, and oneness with each other. And so it is, Ache. Welcome everybody. We are here for Slavery, Reproductive Justice, and Birth Work. Know your roots. We want to let you know that we have Spanish interpretation. Tenemos interpretación en español. You can click on the globe on the bottom of your screen. Presione el botón que parece como un globo y ahí podrá tener acceso a la interpretación en español. We also have ASL interpretation. Make sure that you are looking at the video or try to pin it for folks to see throughout this workshop. With that, we'll get started with an intro video. Mila, do you have that video queued up?
Yep, 1 second.
Okay. Can you share your
Every time I read books or articles about the history of midwifery, it was always referring to the history of the Caucasian midwife.
Mila, if you could change the
Speed.
Due to the fact that they were plenty, Georgia alone had over 4,000 midwives. And when the medical profession was growing in its sense, it was time to remove those midwives. They had a strong reputation of family and culture. They were there as the child and children were growing up. So they were the counselors in the community. They were the caretakers. They were like the bush doctors, and they were the doctors of family lives. And so the medical profession didn't want that, didn't want the competition, even though They didn't get the money the doctors get now, but they were taking over a process that could make more money. So in the mid 40s to the late 40s, going into the 50s, they started to abolish the grand midwives out of existence for not having the facilities where the midwives would get the paperwork for the clients that they had, and they took it away. So any of those midwives that had grandchildren or children, they would teach them some things to prepare them, even though they had to leave the profession.
Lived with my granny until I was 4. And every day, we went out and we went for a walk. And she would point things out to me. And when I was older and grown and she was long gone, a lot of that stuff started coming back. I became kind of the neighborhood herb lady, and people would bring me their mass fingers and ask for advice about sore throats and stuff like that.
A lot of people use the phrase, it's a calling, and it's almost like a cliche, but it really is a calling. When it strikes your heart that this is what you want to do, you want to support women in birth, you want to touch their lives, you want to touch the heads of these babies, it's a passion, sister. It is a calling.
Thank you. Welcome everybody officially now to our Slavery, Reproductive Justice, and Birth Work, Know Your Roots. This workshop is presented by Arizona Birthworkers of Color and Rooted Doula Collective. We're in collaboration with Arizona Reproductive Justice Coalition and sponsored by the National Institute for Reproductive Health. We welcome you all and remind you that we have Spanish interpretation. Access it by clicking the globe on the bottom of the screen. Tenemos interpretación en español. Presione el botón con el globo y lo podrá escuchar la interpretación. We also have ASL interpretation. Make sure to pin the screen with our interpreter. We have 2 interpreters that will be switching. You will see them as Pro Bono ASL. That is the organization that has graced us with interpretation today for ASL. I am Michelle Yvette Ponce. I am your host for this workshop. I'm a birth work advocate, a birth worker, healer, performance artist, and an organizer. I am also the co-founder and co-leader of Arizona Birthworkers of Color. And I welcome you to this space. Now, as we get started, I want you to know that you might be hearing stories, information, recounts today about difficult things in our past. And I want to invite you to remember some form of care for your emotional self. Now, that could mean breathing deeply. That might look like closing your eyes and saying a prayer. That could mean taking a drink of water or tea. Think about what ways you have available to you right now, so that if you feel emotional, if you feel triggered, and if you feel something come up, that you have some way to channel it to take care of yourself if needed. With that, I would like to let you know that you can type in the chat questions or comments. We may get to some questions at the end of each section, but it's possible that we may not get to all the questions. However, if you have any needs, technical or otherwise, just let us know through the chat. To get started, I want to also let you know that this workshop is an offering to you and to the community to talk about the roots of birth work and reproductive justice, and more so to honor the legacy of the Black Southern midwife. Our goal today would be for you to take away some information, some acknowledgement, and some gratitude for those that have paved the way for us to be here now and do this work. So think about where we are now and how the story you will learn of the Black Southern midwife brought us here today. To get us started with that story, I would love to introduce Kiera Otis. Kiera is going to be beginning today's section in African birthing practices. Kiera Otis is a Black, queer, disabled femme from Las Vegas, Nevada. She is a doula, a healer, and whose first teacher was her mother. In 2020, Kiera co-founded the Rooted Doula Collective, which is the first all-Black doula collective in the state of Arizona, with Phyllis Asan. In addition to their kind heart, Kiera has a passion for reading, writing, learning, and teaching, much like their father and grandmother. Kiera is a fourth-year doctoral student in gender studies in the School of Social Transformation, as well as a National Birth Equity Collaborative Research Scholar. Her research is concerned with reproductive justice, birth justice, and birth work. She is deeply invested in protecting and enriching the experiences of Black pregnant, birthing, and postpartum folks and their children, especially those who are queer and trans. Please join me in welcoming Kiera Otis.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for that welcome, Michelle. I'm so grateful to be here with y'all today. I'll never forget when I first met Michelle and Lakeisha. So I was at a all-white birth center at the time, and I happened to find this Arizona Birthworkers of Color conference event, and I just couldn't stop talking about it to anyone that would listen. And I went, and I was super, super, super nervous, but everyone was so warm and affirming and really just made me feel so comfortable. And I remember Marina Farrell doing a land and slavery acknowledgement. And that was something that really stuck with me. I really felt like that Black and Native solidarity. So I'm just thankful to be in this space with y'all. I look up to y'all. So yeah, everything that I do, I hope to have your blessing in it. So I was so thankful to have it in Rooted and in today's workshop. So yeah, I want to talk about African birthing practices around the world. So it can be really tempting to, when we're talking about Black or African folks, it can be tempting to start with slavery. Even, in our title, we kind of did that. We drew you in. We're we're going to talk about slavery, but we want to pause and say, well, for Black and African folks, that is not where our history starts. As Africans or Afro-Indigenous people, we have a rich history that precedes enslavement and colonization. This, colonization has meant that many things have been stolen from us. But one of the things that we've all talked about in forming this workshop and just the really meaningful conversations we've had we know that all the things haven't been stolen. A lot of things are still inside us, and a lot of us are able to learn things from our connections with our ancestors. And so, yeah, I just want to talk about how resilient and resourceful Africans are on the continent and in the diaspora all over the world. We've survived in grueling conditions, and Lakeisha said it's not just because we have strong bodies. It's because we're powerful and resourceful people. We're magical people. And so I think this is really clear in our birthing practices. And so, yeah, that's what these images are. This first one that you'll see on the left is a statue of a birthing person. They're in an upright position. They're not laying on their back. She has someone catching the baby. There are two people at her side. She's supported. So then the next photo, you see a bunch of herbs. I don't know what these herbs are because I'm not an herbalist, but I know that I have some folks here who really know their shit. So I think maybe you can like put them in the chat or something. There's a person wearing their baby close to their chest with an African cloth, and there's a midwife feeling this person's belly while she's laying on her back. Okay, next slide, please. So then we have an image of a group of women outside together. There's a midwife with a fetoscope listening to the baby. They're just sitting out in the shade. They're just all together. There's two photos of people breastfeeding. One is an older child, one is a fresh looking baby, and then there's a root in a bowl. Okay, next slide, please. So some of the main things that you'll find throughout these, throughout African birthing practices around the world, well, the first thing you'll find is community-based healers. They're often women and gender expansive and trans folks, and they view healing as their calling, this very special role. It's not just a profession, it's not something that's transactional. And these healers might have been called root workers or conjure doctors. They're various kinds of folk practitioners, and they have a connection to the land. They use herbs and plant medicine, depending on where they are at in the world. And they also understand that their healing power is based on belief, ritual, and spirituality. These folks, they understand pregnancy, birth, and postpartum holistically. It's not just a single medical event that happens. They might even say that postpartum is forever. They know to incorporate intuition, spirit, ritual, and ceremony. And they also know to afford power, autonomy, and protection to pregnant, birthing, and postpartum people. They're very, very protective of the postpartum period. They're saying, you don't need to go out. You don't need to do anything. They're telling your husband, your partner, your mom, whoever, to handle things for you. And I think, you know, a lot of our families know this. You might see this in them telling you, like, you don't need to go anywhere postpartum, you know, but we don't always recognize that as our like African indigenous traditions. And then you'll also find familial and communal support throughout the birthing and postpartum process. And so one of the most enduring and vital African healers is the Black Southern midwife. And so I'm going to let an actual Black Southern midwife, Lakeisha Muhammad, tell y'all about her.
Thank you, Kiera, for that beautiful introduction. And now I would love to introduce to you my sister, my comadre. Lakeisha Muhammad is motivated by a passion to help pregnant families experience safe and healthy births. Lakeisha serves the community as a certified professional midwife. She is also a licensed midwife in the state of Arizona. Using her knowledge and training, she works to address and debunk myths and misconceptions, replacing them with facts and timeless traditions that lead to better decision making and better outcomes for birthing families. At her practice, called A Mother's Worth Birth Services, Lakeisha also co-leads Arizona Birthworkers of Color, a group of dedicated individuals to uplift, support, and connect birth professionals statewide. She also serves as a board member at large for the Arizona Association of Midwives. When she's not teaching or at a birth, Lakeisha enjoys spending time with her husband, Dwayne, their 3 beautiful children, Amir, Yasina, and Hassana, and her family fur babies, Myra, Calvin, Minnie Pearl, and 4 chickens. I'm sure they're named. I don't know why their names are not on here. You can find A Mother's Worth at A Mother's Worth on Facebook and Instagram, and she holds space on the web at amothersworthbirthservices.com. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Lakeisha Muhammad.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Thank you, Michelle, for that beautiful and warm introduction. You know I appreciate and love you, and I've so enjoyed planning this presentation and just sharing space with all of these beautiful, beautiful comrades of mine in this work. So let's begin. Hello, hello, hello. I am Lakeisha Muhammad, as you've heard. I am a Black woman who was born and raised in the Southern states, and I am a midwife. And this afternoon, I have the distinct honor of sharing with you a story of my ancestors, a story of my mothers, a story of my grandmothers. Thank you, Kiera, for sharing that bit of our rich history. As she stated, our history did not begin with slavery. There was so much more that we need to learn and to explore. And with that being said, I want to make it clear to our listening audience that when we came here in the hulls of slave ships, when we were kidnapped from our motherland, we came with the knowledge. We came with the knowledge. And my unfiltered mouth says we came with the shits. Like, that's really what I wrote, but I'm sanitizing it. So I'm not going to sanitize it for y'all. I'm just going to give it to you, okay? We came with the shits, okay? That's what it was, right? Being the original people of the earth, we already knew the science behind healthcare, human healthcare. When our ancestors came here as enslaved people, they didn't come here as unlearned people. They came as midwives. They came as healers. They came as builders. And guess what they did with that knowledge? They kept us alive. They kept us alive through the most horrific physical and psychological treatment ever inflicted on human beings. And we stand here today on their shoulders because of their knowledge, because of their ingenuity, because of their resourcefulness, because of who they were. We can have workshops via Zoom where we can talk about this history. So I want to make that clear as we begin. So let's talk about the Black Southern midwife. The midwife on the plantation and later in our freed communities was a cornerstone figure, a consummate matriarch, a pillar, an anchor, a trusted care providers for families in the surrounding areas. The midwives not only caught babies, but they possessed the skills of a nurse, a doctor, and even a fertility specialist. They sometimes did other work within the community as entrepreneurs, like owning storefronts. They were tailors and seamstresses, agriculturalists, and some were even undertakers. Okay. They usually learned their craft from family members or other community members. Mama may have said to them, "You're gonna go and help Aunt Emma. Miss Jane, or Granny deliver the babies, with the instructions of just do what she tells you to do. So as we speak today, I must think about my sister and my comrade from Louisiana, Miss Divine Wisdom. And she opened one of our workshops that we hosted here in Phoenix by saying, it was because the term granny midwife, which you may have read or you may have heard, is a bit controversial. It was used as a derogatory term throughout history. And our modern grand midwives referred to as that, a grand midwife. But when I say granny midwife, I'm talking about my granny. And as Divine would say, she was my granny, not your granny. So I can say that, but you may not be able to say that. So you may hear me refer to them as grannies as I speak today. You could easily identify your community midwife back during these times. What sort of things was she doing? One thing was she was walking. Our grandmother midwives would walk miles. They would go far and wide to provide home visits. They would go to the homes and sit with their clients and take care of them and make sure that they were strong and they were healthy and they were ready for the delivery of their babies. They were skilled at identifying healing herbs and making herbal remedies to treat anything that would come up for the whole family. And we're going to talk about that more. They not only treated or worked with the pregnant, but they were the community healers. They helped everybody. And they'd done so on the continuum, womb to tomb, we could say. So through adolescence, administration, entering the childbearing years, and then again in the menopausal years, the midwife took care of families throughout their lifetime. So she could also be found in the kitchen because she used food or nutrition as medicine. She knew just what to whip up when you weren't feeling good. She'd make you something, make you sit down and eat it, and then you feel better, right? Because she knew what she was doing. When it was time for the baby to come, because they were, of course, the baby catchers, right? Granny would put on her crisp white apron and her beautiful white head covering. She'd wash her hands real good and wait patiently, confidently, ready to receive the blessing. She'd support the mother physically, also being her cheerleader, just as we do today, and letting her know that she can do it. After the beautiful baby would come, she'd use her herbs and her remedies to control the bleeding. She delivered the placenta and examined it and make sure it was whole. And before she left that family, she would leave everybody well and resting with lots of instructions, because midwives during these days, they weren't soft. They were loving, they were compassionate, they were caring, but they were stern. They tell you exactly what you needed to do, and you do what Granny told you to do, right? So she would come back, of course, and check on the family. She'd make sure that they were eating well, all warm foods, which is a tradition that we carried with us from West and Central Africa. Postpartum, we want warm things. We want the body to be warm. We want to eat warm things. And she would make sure that you were healing well. She would even advise you on when to have your next baby. So she talked about spacing out the babies, and also contraceptives and things that you could do to prevent having babies if you wanted to. Our midwives had that knowledge as well. Now, as the community healer, later on, if daddy were to cut his thumb, or if the baby that she may have caught just a few years ago were to fall and bust their head to the white meat, as we say, you took them to Granny or you took them to Auntie, and she would fix them right up. She knew exactly what to do. And in these days, all of this loving care that they provided, they may have been paid $2 or $3, or with the chicken, or with fruits and vegetables that the family was able to spare and give to her in appreciation and for the love of the care that they had received. It's also good to note that in colonial America, and we're going to talk a lot about this next, in colonial America, midwives were unregulated, and they were allowed to practice without any government intervention and without really anybody saying anything to them. At most, people wanted to know what they knew. People wanted to follow them and observe them and shadow them and figure out how they were able to keep us alive and strong and thriving to the point that we as a people are still here today. So as I've introduced you to the grand midwives and the things that they used to do and what they used to offer, to community, what happened to this rich history? How did we get from where we had our community midwives in every community who served and served well and with love and compassionate care? How did we get to the point where today, some folks you talk to don't even know who a midwife is? I can remember sitting at a baby shower for a client. This was a couple of years ago. And one of the elders from her family was there. And she brought her over and she said, you know, I want to introduce you to my midwife. And this elder woman said, a midwife? I didn't know that there was even still midwives around. And I looked her in the eye and I said, yes, ma'am, we are still here. We are still here. So what brought us to that point? What brought us to the point where this rich history was erased, we'll say? The first interference into our care for our community as midwives was with Mr. J. Marion Sims. And we know that after the transatlantic slave trade ended, the only slaves that our oppressors had access to were the ones that were already here. So that made birth practices very important. That made the fact that babies got here safely and lived a top priority to our oppressors, to the slave owners, enslavers. So at this point, I want to pay homage to, I want to give honor to Mama Betsy, Mama Lucy, and Mama Anarcha, who were 3 Black women that were experimented upon, who experienced horrific atrocities to their bodies and to their minds and to their souls, as this person used them in order to further the science of obstetrics. Next, we see around the 1910s, there was public scrutiny around the Black midwives. There was lots of talk about how are we going to deal with the Black midwives, because all of a sudden we were a problem. First, it was insurance companies, MetLife to name one, who began to recognize that birth could be used as a cash cow for the hospital system. These babies are coming, you know, and then we had lots of babies. Now we have lots of one and dones, or maybe 2 or 3 babies. Back in this day, we had 10 or 12. We had lots of babies. So those that were in charge of these systems through insurance, through hospitals, and it was also driven later in history by the Hill-Burton Act of 1946, where there was literally millions of dollars being pushed into hospital infrastructure and training around physicians. So we think about this time, the 1910s to the 1946, $5 million is a lot of money today. Imagine the impact of that during that day. But the problem was people in community, especially Black people, because we already experienced racism and bias and discrimination, didn't want to go to the hospitals because they knew that it was just going to be more of that when they got there. They felt comfortable with Granny. They felt comfortable with Annie. They felt comfortable in their homes and they didn't want to leave. And we know in the northern states, there was already a shift from home to hospital where white physicians had become prominent in taking care of the pregnant. So in order for the southern states to cash in on all of this money that was available, all of these so-called advances, they had to get rid of the grand midwives. They had to eradicate and remove the grand midwives. And they needed to do that by eroding the confidence and the love that the community had for those midwives. So they began to implement governmental regulation around the practice of our grandmothers. So through the community health departments, they would now require midwives to register and obtain a permit to practice, which of course, the first barrier is many of our grandmothers were not traditionally learned people. Some of them couldn't even read. So now forms were placed in front of them that they needed to figure out and sign and understand. They required them to go to classes because they wanted to increase the skill. So they sent in white nurses in order to train those that had been serving for some 30, 40, 50 years within their community. They took away their midwife bags. So if I have any care providers that are listening right now, your bag is your everything. Your tools are your everything. And all of the knowledge that they had imbued inside of their bags that they took with them proudly to care for their families were taken away from them. And they replaced them with state-issued bags, with tools that were new to them and very foreign. And they had to figure out how to use them if they wanted to continue to practice. At this point in our talk today, I want to bring your attention to, and I don't want to sanitize at all, the mental and emotional impact that this campaign to erase the contributions of our grandmother midwives had on them. And I want to highlight the fact that there were health bulletins, amongst other tactics, but there were health bulletins that were issued within communities in the South that described our grandmother midwives, those beautiful sweet faces that you just saw on the screen. They described them as dirty, as nasty, unclean, a superstitious hag, a meddlesome old biddy. They said they were unnecessary, untrained. In hearing that, the message to our grandmothers was that they were not enough. The work that they had contributed, that they had sacrificed, that they had given freely and with love was not enough. And to push that agenda forward, they blamed them for bad birth outcomes. And worst of all, baby deaths. So to look at the numbers, to see the impact of that campaign that was portrayed against our grandmother midwives. In the 1940s, 75% of births were attended by midwives in Southeastern US. By the 1970s, hospital births became standard practice. And by 1975, and this same statistic holds to this day in 2021, less than 1% of all births were out of hospital and attended by a midwife. Now that you've heard the story, I want you to recognize, I want to leave you with that if you were born, that if you call yourself a birth worker, that if you call yourself a midwife, you owe a debt to the Black Southern midwife. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sister Lakeisha, for that beautiful presentation. And to help move us through this moment of reflection and emotion. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, thank you. To move us through this moment of reflection and emotion, I would like to introduce to you one of our co-presenters and member of the Rooted Doula Collective, Mila, who is based in Tucson. She's trained with the MBDA to offer holistic fertility and birth doula services. She specializes in trauma-informed and prenatal yoga sessions, and you can find her on a website which I will post in the chat. We're going to welcome Mila in to help ground us and bring us back to center. Mila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. Wherever you are, standing or sitting, place your feet flat on the ground. Elongate your spine. You want to notice how your feet feel with the connection they've made with the earth. Scan your body slowly for areas of tension or unrest. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Relax your entire body. We're going to focus on our breath. Breathe in deep. Hold for just a second. And then release. Once more. Breathe in deep. Hold for just a second. And then release. Let's add another element. Imagine roots, as if your body is a tree. And you have these roots extending from the bottom of your feet, the soles of your feet, deep into the ground. You want to visualize these thick roots pulling you down, connecting you to the earth. Feel the energy and strength of the earth flowing up from the roots, through your feet, through your entire body. With each breath in, feel the power of the earth move through those roots. Again, through your feet, through your stomach, your heart, and through the crown of your head. With each exhale, gently release this tension and any negative thoughts. Let it go into the air. Just let it go into the sky. Michelle was kind enough to create a poem for me to recite. Birth, and she arrives. Birth, she shuffles through the night, waiting, watching. Tools are her hands. Tools are in the memories of her grandmother. Tools in her bag. Always prepared, always ready, always there. Birth, and she arrives. Birth, through the night. Here she comes. Through an ancestor's wisdom, here, whispered in her ear. Do this, here. My family and my body, these herbs, here. Always present, here. Always God-led, here. Always here. Tools are her hands. Tools in her granddaughter's blood. Tools in her bag. Always ready. Always there. Birth, and she arrives.
Thank you, Mila, so much for doing that poem justice. And with that, I would love to welcome you to this next portion of the workshop as we move along, where we're going to bring it more towards present day and how this history informs what we know as reproductive justice. And to do that for us, I will reintroduce Kiera Otis.
Hi, y'all. Can everyone hear me okay? We good? Okay. I feel super fancy with this mic, so shout out to my partner, Leon. But thank you so much, Mila, for grounding us. Yeah, that was really, really needed. And I just want to thank all of you who are in attendance. If you came a little bit late, yeah, just want to welcome you here. We're really grateful for this opportunity to share this information with y'all, especially for the Black folks that are here. And so, yeah, now to talk about reproductive justice. So it's so funny. I hadn't heard of reproductive justice until I became a doula. And so I learned about reproductive justice through doula work, actually. But so I ended up reading a bunch of books about reproductive justice because I'm a doctoral student. And one of the things that really stood out to me was just this day when all of these Black women came together in Chicago. It was the winter, it was cold. I know we're in Arizona. I don't know how many of y'all have been to Chicago, but it is so fucking cold there. It'll just like really, it feels like a punch to the chest. And so I'm just imagining them all like in their fur coats and, you know, their hats, and they've got their tea and their coffee or whatever they're drinking to stay warm. And they come together and they're thinking like, man, we have really been through some stuff. Like, you know, generationally, we've been through all of these things. So what are we going to do about it? What have we been doing about it? And they came together and articulated this framework and this movement of reproductive justice. And so, yeah, next slide, please. So reproductive justice is often associated with 1, the right to bodily autonomy, 2, the right to not have children through abstinence, contraception, or abortion, 3, the right to have children under the conditions we choose, 4, the right to parent in safe and sustainable communities. Okay, so next slide, please. So while this initial meeting for reproductive justice was mainly Black women, these women came together with Latina women, Asian women, Pacific Islander and Native American women to form this framework and this movement. And it was birthed into Sister Song, which is the first reproductive justice organization in the US, and they've been incredibly influential. And they got this idea to use the human rights framework from women in the global South, or what we call what you'll hear people call third world countries or developing countries. So reproductive justice has always been concerned with reaching across borders. And it's always been a response to the reproductive injustices that so many of our communities face. So, you know, we've gone over some of these injustices here today. The history of chattel slavery, the formulations of obstetrics and gynecology through experimentation on enslaved African women, and just general experimentation on the bodies of Africans to further Western medicine. But a lot of these other injustices have also included settler colonialism and the genocide of indigenous folks, the separation of parents and children during slavery from boarding schools, and now the child welfare system, involuntary sterilization, police violence, imprisonment, deportation. Like, these are really, really big problems that we're up against that make it difficult for us to have the rights to our body and to have the families that we want to form. So reproductive justice is really concerned with being intersectional and dismantling all of these axes of oppression. You know, it's not only about one group, it's about coming together and really dismantling patriarchy and the way that it harms women and other folks of other marginalized genders. You know, the ongoing subjugation of non-European people, the privileging of one kind of family where only, you know, we only recognize one kind of family, and we don't see that our families have always had huge extended queer formations. You know, it might not be same gender loving, but, you know, we have our aunties and our grandmas that are helping us raise our families. It's never just supposed to be a man and a woman on their own. You know, it's too hard to do alone. We're supposed to be in our villages. And so, yeah, part of having an intersectional practice and doing this reproductive justice work is centering those who are most marginalized and closest to the problem. So yeah, our work at Arizona Birthworkers of Color and Rooted Doula Collective It falls under birth justice. Mila, if you could go to the next slide. So yeah, the right to have children under the conditions we choose. And so, yeah, I'm going to let Michelle tell you a little bit more about Arizona Birthworkers of Color, and then I'll come back and tell you all about Rooted.
Thank you, Kiara. Yes, Arizona Birthworkers of Color really started when my sister Lakeisha and I were together and sort of commiserating on how difficult it was to be a birth worker of color in this city, in this state, in this country, because we were so isolated, because we didn't have other folks that we can talk to about what we were going through, or even reflect on the injustices, on the aggressions and microaggressions, and on really the systemic racism that we were seeing in our work. And so we got together and we said, well, I think we need to create an organization, some space, a platform for other birth workers to connect. And so for us, our work to be nurtured and developed. And so we started this organization, and it really just started as a Facebook group. And it grew as a way to create opportunities for birth workers of color to connect to each other, to create a village for themselves, for each other, and then to also expand their professional skills, to be able to have workshops and attend meetings and learn from each other from across the country. And so that's what Arizona Birthworkers of Color stands for more than anything, is providing the support and the respect and the honor that birth workers like the Black midwives, like Black doulas, need and want and deserve, because they do bridge that gap for the needs that our families have in this society. We also do a lot of other stuff, but I'll leave it right there. And so, Kiara, do you is there anything that I missed, Miss Lakeisha, about our organization that you want to share?
You got it.
Okay. So now, Kiara, you can bring us back into, let's talk about Arizona specifically.
Yeah.
And what's going on here in terms of birth work and reproductive justice.
Yes, I'm happy to. So if we want to go to the next slide. So yeah, I just want to talk about the different definitions. I know a lot of us here are probably birth workers, but I don't want to assume, and I want folks to know what these different things mean. So as we discussed, the midwife is someone who provides holistic support, but their main role is to provide medical support. There are several different kinds of midwives. There's the traditional midwife, the certified nurse midwife, that's who you usually find in hospitals, certified midwife, and certified professional midwives. Okay, so then there's also doulas, and these are also trained support people who provide spiritual, physical, emotional, informational support, and advocacy. And they might have certain roles carved out for them. So they might be birth or postpartum or abortion doulas, or they might be a full spectrum doula, but they are not medically trained. And then there are OBGYNs, obstetricians, gynecologists. And then there are lactation consultants. You'll often hear people recommend IBCLCs. So that's an international board certified lactation consultant. And all of these folks and more are called birth workers. That's kind of the overall umbrella term that we use. So you might also find massage therapists, pelvic floor therapists, placenta encapsulators, all sorts of folks doing this kind of work. And so, yeah, some of the these are your birthing options in Arizona, which is, it feels so wild to say, like, these are your options. These are your 3 options, because it feels kind of restrictive, but I don't know. This is what they are. So you have the option of home birth, and that can be a free or unassisted birth. So that's when you're not having a medical provider present during labor and birth. And anyone who's around is hands off. Or you can also have a midwife attended home birth like Miss Lakeisha. You can also have a birth center birth, and that would also be midwife attended. And you can also have a hospital birth that's attended by an OBGYN or a midwife. So yeah, COVID has had quite an impact on birthing. I mean, really all over the country, but in Arizona as well. So it's meant that, well, it's revealed for some folks just how dangerous hospitals can be, and so a lot of people have been like, okay, I don't want to be in the hospital because this doesn't feel like, an emergency. This is something that feels every day. I've done this before, or, I watched so and so do this. And then, sorry, I lost my place, y'all. Okay, and and then yeah, you're less likely to have people around to support you between like quarantining and just not having your usual village and community around to celebrate and get you ready and love on you when your feet hurt or bring you food or whatever. But also having less people at your appointments or on your actual birthday if you are in the hospital. There's also been the separation of parents, postpartum parents from their newborns because of COVID, whether that's like refusing to test or having a positive test result. And yeah, and then obviously wearing a mask during labor while having those surges can be really, really annoying and uncomfortable. And so, yeah, Lakeisha's going to talk about access to midwifery care here in the state.
Thank you, Kiera. Yeah, just to add to a little bit the effects of COVID, I have a lot of folks coming to me that some that may have never considered home birth before, but a lot of them that were thinking about it. And with all of the policy changes that we're seeing in hospitals, that has been what's pushed them toward the home birth route. As far as accessibility of home birth or of midwifery services, home birth midwifery services specifically here in the state, they are widely inaccessible to the poor. My services as a home birth midwife are not covered by Access, that's our state funded insurance, and they are also not covered by most major insurance companies. So for all of my families, they are paying out of pocket. And that is a huge financial barrier to the type of care that they may want. I also want to add to that, most recently here in our state, as early as June, there was a ruling that came down that I, as a, what was the term exactly? Not an access or registered access provider. That's what it was. Registered access provider could not order lab work for my clients, which leaves me and them in a very hard predicament sometimes. We just spoke of the financial barriers and covering costs just for services. Now we add lab work on top of that could easily be covered by our state insurance, but as of now is not. So just another barrier to providing options for care for pregnant families.
Thank you so much, Lakeisha. And then there are also wider systemic issues in Arizona related to abortion access, which Eloisa and Brianna from our coalition will be covering in a later workshop. But we also have a lot of what people call poverty, or we have a lot of working class folks in Arizona. 37% of people are renters. 10% of people are uninsured. 22% of folks have low wage jobs. and the percent of families living under 200% of the poverty line is 30%. So that means about 45% of people are living 200% below the poverty line. I don't know if y'all have seen the poverty line, but it's not a lot of money. And also food insecurity is a big issue in Arizona. And we know that there's a huge correlation between nutrition and eating and pregnancy and birth outcomes. And folks don't even have access to food. That's, that's a tenth of the people in Arizona. And so then, the very last thing going on with birthing in Arizona that we felt was important to talk about was the Access Voluntary Doula Certification Bill that was passed. And so now they're moving forward with figuring out the certification process. And I think, Michelle, do you want to talk about how ASBOC was involved in making sure Black and Brown folks were part of that conversation about the voluntary doula certification?
Yes, sure. And for everyone, ASBOC is just our short term for Arizona Birthworkers of Color. So we had the privilege of being able to sit and help co-write that policy with some other folks on the table. That was an important part for us to take because especially Miss Lakeisha had been a doula here in Phoenix, in Arizona for 15 years. So she was able to see the need for having doula services covered by public insurance, how important that would be for our low-income families, especially Black and Brown women that really wanted and needed extra support during birth. And so we participated in that process and were able to get a language in it that made sense and also a process that would honor the doulas that are already doing the work and able to honor that they have been, that make the certification process accessible for them, and also acknowledging the work that doulas may have done, even if they haven't been certified by a big organization. So we were part of that process. We were happy to be a part of that process, and we continue to support that implementation, that law being implemented for the sake of our families. Is there anything else that I missed there, Ms. Lakeisha, about that?
No, not that you missed it all. I just wanted to add that the bill has the potential to not only benefit families that need doula services and desire that extra support, but also doulas. One of the things that I've observed over the years is we have so many people, birth workers, who want to serve, who desire to put themselves out there and assist families in birth, but if we're working with people who already don't have money and you don't have money, and it just becomes a conundrum, right? It becomes problematic in and of itself. So while this bill is surely not the silver bullet, but it is one way that we could potentially help financially back folks who want to support families in birth. Is one way that we can push that agenda forward and start to resist the burnout that happens when you're always working for free, which is definitely a reality for many new birth workers and those that have been in the game for a while as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so grateful for all that y'all did. And I also know that the Siwa Pakli Collective, Maria Carmen, was very involved in that as well. So want to shout y'all out.
Pakli Collective, I believe South Phoenix Healthy Start was also at the table.
And I want to acknowledge Sister Fatima Mohammed, another amazing Black midwife locally. She did a lot of the groundwork of connecting with doulas to figure out what the doulas needed, what Black and Brown Indigenous doulas needed and wanted in respect to this bill and to the arrangement with the state.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, and then the last thing we wanted to bring up was just cannabis testing for newborns and pregnant and postpartum people. There's a big case going on right now where this woman had a medical, they call it marijuana, and I don't like calling it that. She had a medical cannabis card, and yeah, now she's having trouble with CPS and her child. And so these are just some of the things that we're thinking about. Go ahead, Michelle. Yeah.
Because this big case is it's a white woman who used to work for the Department of Child Services, DCS. And so she had a medical condition that the doctor agreed that needed to be treated with consumption of cannabis. And because they found it in her system and in the baby's system, traces of it, they wanted to take the baby away. Now, because she has had so much experience and privilege in that work, she was able to garner support nationally to then go to court, right? To challenge what they're doing. But what I want to mention is that the countless Black and brown women that have had babies taken away from them, either temporary or permanently, who have not had the privilege of that she had to be able to go to court and challenge those decisions. So DCS and the cannabis world and the court systems are a big part of the challenges that we have today as birthing families.
Thank you, Michelle. You're absolutely right. Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit earlier and had Michelle tell y'all about Arizona Birthworkers of Color. So Mila, do you mind skipping ahead to the part about rooted? Okay, so in this photo pictured on the far left, there's Phyllis Hassan, and then in the middle is Tyrell Blackmoss, and then I'm on the right with a little bit more hair. And so yeah, Rooted Doula Collective is a community of Black doulas rooted in love and care for Black African people as we experience pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. We have a few different scopes of our work. So yeah, the number one priority is just to be a space of community for Black doulas, letting us know that we're not the only ones, coming together about how we can support each other with the little things like, you know, I'm sick and I need some food, or childcare, or AC goes out, or all sorts of things. And then we also have the Doula Access Program, which is our collaboration with Desert Star Institute for Family Planning. They're our fiscal sponsor, and so we offer pledges to birthing folks and postpartum folks to get doula services covered, so that the doulas are getting paid and, you know, the folks are getting the services that they need, because the burnout is very real. You know, as much as we would love to just give endlessly and endlessly, you know, we're humans too. We have families, and a lot of the birth workers are also parents or, you know, birthing folks. It's not separate. So yeah, and then we're also engaged in work around advancing birth equity and reproductive justice in Arizona. We're very fresh, so we're still kind of carving out what our space is going to be like, but you know, we just talk about loving on Black people. That's the goal. So
Yes. Thank you, Kiara, for sharing about your work. And so here we are. We're here today. This is the work that we're doing and supporting. And I want to talk about a little bit about Arizona Reproductive Justice Coalition, which is the coalition that we were able to participate in with a list of other amazing organizations. And I want to share that through their work, through our work as a coalition, we talk about bodily autonomy, and also the entitlement of all Arizonans to be able to access resources, to live healthy, dignified lives, free from stigma, free from discrimination, and free from violence in all its forms. And so we have a month long of workshops that share information about all the different sections of reproductive justice in Arizona, and we welcome you to participate in those and share. The more we talk about these things and learn how to talk about them, the more we can advocate for them and for the families that we serve and the communities we support. So I want to invite you all to participate in those. So we're here, almost at the end of our workshop. Woof! We made it. Now, what is it that we would love for you to take away? Community-based birth workers are bridges. They bridge the gap in our current care. These are gaps that are left by the medical industrial complex, right? Much like the midwives did in the period behind us. These birth workers today take on a role of providing the care that you're missing out on. It means that we'll have healthier and fuller reproductive care, and that's possible through community-based birth workers. We want you to take away that community-based birth workers need to be supported socially, professionally, and personally. When birth workers have the support they need, they're better equipped to offer quality, compassionate services to birthing community. And this is the work that comes into undoing the bad media, the bad marketing created around why community birth workers were bad for us, right? Now we have to undo that and dismantle that concept. And we also want you to take away that reproductive care is part of a larger vision of reproductive justice that involves dismantling all structures of oppression. Now that you know more about where things went wrong, now we can build something right. Let's build something new, and let's do it together. How do we do that? Here's your call to action. Birth worker training. Yes, if you're interested in learning more about birthing practices, how to support families during birth, do take a training, a workshop, look up information online. We're at this beautiful place in time where there's so much information shared, especially by Black and Indigenous brown birth workers that you can find. So see if you want to learn more about birth work. Even if you're not going to go into business as a birth work, that information is going to be able to help the community because you're going to carry that knowledge now. Donate. You can donate to the Doula Access Program that Kiera mentioned, where they're offering little to no cost services to Black families in Arizona. So donate to their program. Donate to us, Arizona Birthworkers of Color. We provide services and support for birth workers. And we also have a huge project we do every year, which is the Black Breastfeeding Week. And we offer free classes, workshops, support, group support, and more to the community here to support breastfeeding and to teach and help the rest of the community learn about breastfeeding so that they can also support breastfeeding families. And then attend the rest of the events we have for this month of October. I don't know if you all know, but this past week was the Black Reproductive Justice Week. So there was a lot of organizations that were sharing information about reproductive justice work. And we're going to have more workshops for the rest of the month, about 2 a week. They're free. They are going to be interpreted in Spanish and have ASL interpretation. And we welcome you to join them. Also, follow us on our social media. If you learned something from this workshop, if it moved you, if it shifted your perspective in any way, or if you just liked to watch our stories, show this love by tagging us, We're at Rooted Doula Collected. We also at Rooted Doula on Twitter. And that's on Instagram and Facebook. And then for us, Arizona Birthworkers of Color, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And our website is almost ready, y'all. It's going to be beautiful. So we'll share that with you all on our social media. And if you're going to post about it today, go ahead and hashtag Know Your Roots so that we know and can see and build this movement of honoring the legacy of our past. All right. How's everybody feeling? Does anyone have any questions? I didn't see any in the chat so far, but we do have a few minutes to be able to answer questions or comments if you like. I can unmute you from my space, but let me know if you have questions. You can put it in the chat or the Q&A, or I can also unmute you, I believe. Lauren says, so grateful for all the information and resources shared. Screenshots, is everyone okay for them to take screenshots to share on social media? Lakeisha, yes, okay, I say yes too. Thank you for asking. Yes, so wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. Beautiful. So we're a little bit ahead of time. If there are no more questions, we can end early, I guess. Who would have thought of that? If you do think of any questions, you can email us or tag us or anything like that. Thank you. Yes, thank you for asking for consent. So we're gonna end with a little song. We're gonna try this out, because if there's one thing that I know from hanging out briefly with traditional midwives, with Black midwives in Colombia and from all over, is that these midwives like to dance, they like to sing, they like to celebrate. And we want to honor them, honor their history, the ones that came before, the ones that are now, by holding that joy in our heart for the work that they do, for the work that we do. So we just want to share that joy through song. Now, this may be a little challenging through Zoom and audio and all the nuances of the audio situation, but we're going to try it out. And what I'm going to ask of you in your space where you're at, in your home, is to just participate with a call and response with us. So we're going to create a call and response, and we'll sort of like vibe with you and see what we can do. We got a few instruments in the house. I heard there's a tambourine going to make a... Hey! And so we're going to end it with lots of joy and love. So this is what it is. The joy that we feel. So we're going to say, I got joy. I got joy. That'll be your part. All right? So that'll be your response as I call to you. Okay? So can I hear? I'm going to, even though you're still muted, I'm going to pretend like I could hear you. Let me hear you. I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
And now you're going to keep it going, and I'll just go back in and out, all right? I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
In my heart.
I got joy.
In my soul.
I got joy.
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 In my heart.
I got joy.
In my soul.
I got joy.
I got peace.
I got
peace.
I got peace.
I got joy.
In these herbs.
I got joy.
I got peace.
I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
In these hands.
I got joy.
In these heads,
I got joy.
I got joy.
I got joy.
I got love.
And I got joy.
In my world,
I got joy.
I got love.
I got joy.
In my soul,
Got joy.
I got joy. I got joy. In my heart,
I got joy.
I got joy. There you go.
I got joy.
Take it away, Lakeisha.
Woo!
Thank you all.
Work.
Thank you for coming. Thank you to our interpreters, Avery and Aaron. Thank you also to Maxima and Carla. Thank you, Mila. Thank you, Kiera. Thank you to all the participants. And thank you to you. Oh, thank you.
And thank you, Michelle. Wonderful job moderating, guiding us through all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of your weekend.